Welcome to another episode of Angels, Positivity, and Love. Incredible experts the world over, amazing backgrounds, and fascinating insights they're here to share with us. They've also been on their own unique life journeys. They're here to help us on ours. They've often been through transformative experiences, just been hit by a bolt of lightning, near-death experience. 5 of them is the record so far, or just the usual route of, life lessons, experience, and so on. We often have a lot of intuitives, healers. We've had a White House physician to the US president. We've got a doctor who currently is in Grenada helping the victims of the hurricane there. New York Times bestsellers, Watkins 100 list folks, as well as even a guest from Oprah's Super Soul Sunday and an Oprah Super Soul 100 teacher. Today, no exception in terms of how incredible this guest is from Alabama. We've got Julie Ryan. She's a psychic, medical intuitive, multiple books out, been doing this a long time. She's super able to just tune in or scan where you're at. And this could be anything. It could be your medical situation, how much longer you have left on the ticker, past lives, pretty much everything. So she's been doing this a while. We're going to get to her background. We're going to get to what she's here to share in just a second. Julie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Michael. What a delight to be with you.
Hey, I wanted to go on a tangent right off the bat and just have you share with us one of those moments in life that you still shake your head on. Did you have a moment of serendipity, synchronicity, running into an angel in human form, anything like that that you could share with us?
Absolutely. I was flying to Los Angeles from my home in Birmingham, Alabama. It was Mother's Day. I was meeting my physician at her office because I was in town for, I think, 2 days, and she was coming in on Mother's Day to see me, and the plane was running late. And I had intended to stop by even a grocery store and pick her up some flowers as an extra thank you for coming in on Mother's Day, for heaven's sakes. So I'm thinking, all right, how are we going to do this? And I texted her when the plane landed. I said, I got to pick up a rental car and then I'll be right over. And she said, well, I got to be at brunch with my family at fast. And I said, great, I'll be there. So I'm thinking, well, I hope they have flowers in the gift shop at LAX at the airport. And I got off the plane within 5 minutes, Michael, less than 5 minutes. I walked by this woman, no flowers in the gift shop. And I walked by this woman and I said, oh, your flowers are beautiful. Happy Mother's Day. And she said, here, take them. And I said, no, 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 they're yours. She said, I'm flying to New York. They're more hassle than they're worth. Please, you take them and enjoy them. And I said, okay, thank you so much. And so I had this huge bouquet of gladioli, those big old flowers, a big bouquet of them. And I took them to my doctor as a thank you for coming in on Mother's Day. So I believe that that was an angel encounter because I thought of it. I thought, I hope I find some in the airport. I was thinking the gift shop, but even better, they were free and they were much better than any kind of little, gift shop flower I was going to find. And this woman just gave me the flowers and went off and said, Happy Mother's Day.
I love it. Okay, now where do we start for your story so people can understand you, how talented you are, how much you've been helping people, for how long? Where do we begin?
Well, I'm a businesswoman and an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world and former manufacturer. And I learned how to do woo-woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. How about that? Because once we connect with spirit, we can do anything we want. I don't understand why we're all siloed. You got the healers and the pet psychics and mediums and whatever. You connect with spirit, and then it's all the same thing. You can do whatever you want. So how it came about was 30 years ago, a little more than 30 years ago, a friend gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace. And she called herself a medical intuitive. And I thought, what the heck is that? I'd never heard that term before. And I was in the medical business. I was manufacturing surgical devices and inventing them. And so I was always interested in helping people heal, but just from a conventional perspective. And back then, Michael, we didn't have the internet yet. So I did the old fashioned thing and I went to a bookstore, went to a Barnes and Noble, to see what else they had after I read Carolyn Mace's book. And I found a book called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan, who's a former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable English for the non-scientific mind. That would be me. And she was talking about how she was using quantum energy and energy to help people heal. And I thought, well, this is interesting. So I called her school and I said, do you guys have anybody teaching this stuff in my area? And sure enough, they did. So I studied for 6 years with a woman who's a graduate of Barbara's class. And here I am today. So it's been really an interesting ride. At the time, I was running companies and, doing entrepreneurial things, mom, wife, that kind of thing. And my friends and family said, well, why are you doing this? And I said, I don't know. And they said, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I have no clue. I don't know that I'm ever going to do anything with it. It's just interesting. So I was being led. And here I am all these years later, and I've done it. It's like 6, 7 years full time now since I sold my surgical device manufacturing company.
Can you talk to us just a little bit about the technical aspects? Is it heavily on the hands, heavily you put your hand on your heart, you close your eyes to do it, you leave your eyes open? How has it evolved from like the beginning, the Barbara Brennan classes and stuff like that, to now? Also, where were the hiccups where you were like, oh, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure my hands are working. Can you describe just a little more flavor or color for all that?
Yeah, sure. It came in pretty easily. I never had an experience with spirit before that. You hear about these psychics and mediums that had dead people that they could see as children. I always say I didn't have dead people chasing me as a kid, or if I did, I wouldn't have known what to do with that. I was raised Catholic, 12 years at Catholic schools. So I think the Catholics do a really good job of setting us up for woo-woo, if you will, because I was taught as a very young child that I had a guardian angel and that I could pray to saints and God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, and all of that. Even in my mid 60s, I can recite the angel of God, the angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here. I can recite that prayer because I said it every night as a child. So I was set up to believe in those things. And then when I was able to start seeing them, I was like, well, darn, these people were right. And it's been going on since the beginning of time. So I didn't really do much with it at the beginning. I used it on family and friends, and primarily family, my son and my husband, just because they were easy guinea pigs with whom I lived. And then over the years, it developed into, I rarely, I would say, a fraction of a percent ever am with somebody when I'm working with them. It's always remote. And so I could find you, Michael, if you were on a planet far, far away in a different galaxy. Doesn't matter. It's all energy. I just connect, and then we're connected, my spirit to your spirit, and we can take it anywhere we want.
Okay, so angels, they come in all shapes, sizes, colors, all sorts of backgrounds. They're unconditional love. They don't want to interfere with our free will, but there are some waypoints during your life you've signed up for. Can you talk to us about angels? How do you view angels?
Angels look to me like a little Catholic girl would imagine they look. Big wings, white gown, rope belt, barefoot, long hair cascading down to the shoulder and soft curls. I know that that's not necessarily what angels look like, but that's how they look to me because that's my frame of reference. Somebody that grows up in an indigenous culture in the Amazon perhaps may see angels as just a blob of purple energy. It's all subjective. It's all, how are we going to understand what we're seeing intuitively, and how can we put that into our minds where it makes sense based on our life's experiences and our human frame of reference.
Okay, and so talk to us about like compassion, kindness, gentleness. How does that play a role? And I'll kind of do a half question off of that, which is love the fabric of the universe?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I think all of those different emotions that you just mentioned. They're all really high vibration emotions. And in order for us to communicate with spirit, whether it be an angel or a deceased loved one or Napoleon or George Washington or whomever, it doesn't matter whether you knew them or not. We've got to raise our vibrational level because spirit doesn't communicate on the I feel crappy channels because the vibration's too low. So when I'm working with someone who's in deep grief and they'll say, "Oh, my husband hasn't been around. I can't see him. I can't feel him. I can't communicate with him." Well, they're grieving. It's like they're listening to the country music station with a song about somebody whining about mama, the truck, and the dog, and their deceased loved one is on the classical music station. It's just a different frequency. They're there, they just can't perceive them at the moment.
They're listening to Enrico Caruso, little Italian opera from
Exactly.
exactly.
Something
Uh,
like
okay, so that's a great mention because there's helping parents heal, and there's a lot of grieving people out there who have lost somebody. Talk to us a little bit more. It's obviously a huge ordeal. You go through the trauma of losing someone, but there's always a broader perspective. Sometimes it takes us decades. Sometimes some people are a lot shorter than that to figure out a way to handle it better. What's this all about when you lose a loved one?
Yeah, Helping Parents Heal is an amazing organization. Actually, I'll be there in a couple of weeks. I'm speaking at their conference, their biannual conference in Scottsdale in a couple of weeks, and they just are tremendous. What my goodness, what amazing work they do for parents that have lost a child. So the work that I do among my whole buffet of psychicness is I can tell how close to death somebody is. I help people when they're grieving. All of the graduates of my class can do the same thing. And how it works is there's a configuration that the angels use when somebody is at the end of their lives. And I've coined it the 12 phases of transition. And it's just how the different positions of the angels are as the person is getting closer and closer to their departure time. And it's glorious, Michael. I mean, when we're losing a loved one, my God, it's heart wrenching. And this gives a glorious component to the equation. That person who's dying, their closest maternal spirit is the one that runs the show from the spirit world. So in my case, my mother's deceased. So it would be my mother. If my mother was still alive, it would be her mother. If she was deceased, if she was still alive, it would be my grandmother's mother. And it's always on the maternal line. That's been my experience. And then the paternal spirit comes in. My dad's deceased. So my dad would be there with her. If he was still alive, it would be my maternal grandfather. Again, it's all on the maternal line. And we can talk more about that in a minute. And then the maternal spirit brings in the angels, which really surprised me. I thought that's probably got like a air traffic control department in heaven or something where he dispatches angels to come pick somebody up when they're ready to come to heaven. Or I thought their guardian angel might be the one that's running the show, but it's not. In my experience doing this, oh gosh, thousands of times, it's always the maternal spirit that's running the show. So the maternal spirit brings in the angels. They form a circle around the person who's dying with the parent spirits as the anchor. And then as the person gets closer and closer to death, that circle opens up into a horseshoe and then eventually a straight line across the foot of the bed. Let's say if the dying person's in a bed. And I always see the 12 phases of transition occur, regardless of if somebody dies instantly, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, or if they die over a prolonged period of time, like days, weeks, months, even years. I always see that. There are a couple of nuances that I think deserve mention, if I may. The first one is that the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets come in and they're part of the equation, and they're on the other side of the angel ring with the parents, and then eventually that straight line across the foot of the bed. The angels are kind of like the heavenly crowd control, spirit crowd control, because I'll always see that the spirits that have committed. And I mean, there's thousands and thousands of them. They look like dots on the horizon. They're coming in and they're always on the other side of the angel line. I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee. So, interestingly enough, university based research shows that 90% of people at the end of their lives talk about seeing deceased loved ones and pets. 90%. That's a big deal. So, and anybody that you talk to that's been with a loved one, or anybody that works in critical care or hospice or the emergency room, they all have endless stories about, yeah, my patient was talking to his dead grandmother and she's been dead for 90 years or something like that. So it's really heartwarming. And then I can describe the pet spirits that are there, and that it just brings so much comfort to the family. The spirits that arrive are from all of that person's lifetimes too, which is interesting because they'll be in period dress. Like I may see somebody from the Renaissance. I may see somebody dressed like Twiggy in the 1960s with a mini skirt and go-go boots, things like that. So that's really fun. And the pet spirits are there about phase 6. There's a development that occurs. The person's spirit exits through the top of the head. It looks like a speech bubble or a cartoon caption bubble. And then that's the spirit starting to disconnect. But as they're going through all the phases, they stay attached. So what happens is around phase 6, there are 2 extra angels that show up on either side of the spirit bubble. And around phase 9, their wings start to move, Michael. And the first time I ever saw any of this was with my own mother when she was dying. And my heart was breaking because my mother was dying. And at the same time, I'm watching this show going, whoa, this is amazing. What's going to happen next? Kind of a thing. And so in phase 9, when their wings start to move on either side of the spirit bubble, it creates a vortex above the person's head. And I can feel it, I can see it, I can hear it. And it's what helps the spirit separate from the body. You'll hear people with near-death experiences say, I went through a tunnel. I believe that's what they're referring to. And so when I was writing my book, Angelic Attendants, just for kicks, I thought, well, I'm just gonna do an internet search because the movement of the angel's wings remind me of a giant owl, rhythmic, slow, methodical. And I thought, I'm just going to do an internet search of owl wings vortex. Well, come to find out, there's this phenomenon in anything that flies, or whether it be a jet, a plane, a bird, a bug, a kite, whatever. There's a phenomenon called the wingtip vortex. And it's a vortex that forms underneath the wing, again, regardless of if it's an actual animal or if it's a jet, and it causes lift. And I thought, oh, for heaven's sakes, I'm watching something in real time from the spirit world that's creating a phenomenon that I can see, feel, and hear. And it's causing lift. It's causing the spirit to help lift out of the body. So that really, I think, is remarkable. And if you go online and you type in wingtip vortex, there are just tens of thousands, if not more, aeronautical engineering drawings and articles and information on the wingtip vortex. Who knew? Had you ever heard of the wingtip vortex?
I had not. I love
I
it.
hadn't either. Yeah. One other interesting point is in every Catholic funeral, there's a prayer said called In Paradisum. It's either said or sung. And In Paradisum in Latin is into paradise. And it talks about how the angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets will greet you and lead you into paradise. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I see in the 12 phases of transition.
Beautiful. Okay, let's jump sideways a little bit to dream time. Have you
Okay.
had experiences? Are you the type that remembers all your dreams? You never remember a dream for the last 5 years? What went down? Where? Which dream? What happened? What's one you can share with us? What happens in dream time?
Dream time, normally, I don't remember my dreams, but like 5, 6-ish in the morning when I'm starting to wake up, I get what I call divine downloads. And I'll get information downloaded from spirit. That can take the form of I've had old business plans downloaded that I've utilized. I've had almost daily, there'll be something like, remember to do this, remember to send this person an email, remember to look into that kind of thing. I'll get information about something that's getting ready to occur, or something that I'm being led to do. It's just kind of all over the board. And there's a guy named Clark Strand who has coined the term the hour of God. And he says it's usually between 3 and 5 in the morning, 3 and 6 in the morning. And that's when the veil, the so-called veil, is the thinnest. And that's when spirit can communicate to us when we're in kind of that just waking up, kind of still sleepy phase. So yeah, I've had dreams too, but I think the divine downloads are way more pertinent in my life at this point.
Did your mom, grandmother ever visit you though during dream time?
Oh, I'm sure they have, but more often what'll happen is I'll be laying on my side and I'll be facing the couch in my room, and those spirits will be sitting there and they'll want to have a conversation. When my brother-in-law died a few years ago, my sister had preceded him in death in 2010. And my brother-in-law, she died very unexpectedly. And then my brother-in-law, 11 years later, passed. And I woke up a couple days, I think it was the day after he passed, Michael. And I woke up and I was facing the couch in my bedroom. There were the two of them sitting on the couch, giggling, having a conversation. And I said, Regis, what the heck? What happened? And he said, I had a bleeding ulcer that ruptured.
Mm.
And so, guess what? The autopsy showed he had a bleeding ulcer that ruptured. Yeah. So that's more common. One of my best friends, her dad passed. And the next morning, he showed up on the couch and we talked for 45 minutes. And I said, okay, you got to wait a minute. I got to go get my phone. And I dictated what he told me into the phone. And it was probably 3 pages typed that I gave to my friend. And she shared it with her siblings and her mother. And it brought them lots of comfort. And it was lots of information of stuff. There's no way I would have known it, but he wanted them to know certain things and know that he was around them and all of that. So they were very much in grief. So I had met him on more than one occasion, and he knew that I would be able to communicate with him. So I was the one that he came to. So I get that more often than I get, information downloaded into dreams. I'm totally awake when I'm getting the information downloaded.
You have pretty strict boundaries though with folks on the other side, especially if they're ones you don't know, they still want your attention. Do you make them ring a doorbell, or do you have, again, certain rules put in place or boundaries that keep some others away that you're like, hey?
I've never had an experience where an unwanted spirit came in. It was either a family member or like my friend's dad. I don't walk around scanning people. I don't walk around talking to spirit. I turn my radar on and off. Takes me a nanosecond. So I do have a fun story about that. If you'd like for me to share, you're in
Absolutely.
Texas. You're
You're
in
on a roll.
Texas. So Austin, Texas, the Driscoll Hotel
Oh my God,
is
which is, yeah, old.
very historic. I'm in there having lunch. I was giving a talk in Austin. This was 10 years ago. And I, not quite 10, but maybe 8 or 9. And I was having lunch in their beautiful cafe. And I was reading on the back of the menu the history of the hotel. And it said that they used to have visiting psychics that would come to their spa. And this was before the turn of the 20th century. So this is in the late 1800s. I thought, well, that's cool. So after lunch, I went to the concierge and I said, can somebody please give me a tour? I'm visiting and I just had lunch. And she said, sure. So she got me this little bellman to go on the tour. And when you walk in the hotel, there's this double staircase that goes up on both sides. And in the middle of the staircase is this life-size portrait of Colonel Driscoll, who was the guy who started the hotel, and he made his fortune off of selling beef to the Confederate Army during the Civil War. So hi, Colonel Driscoll, saw his painting. So we go upstairs, and there's this like a mezzanine area with a bunch of ballrooms around it. And this little guy is telling me about the ballrooms, and LBJ that was where he watched the election results come in for the presidential elections and his Senate. And he met his wife, Lady Bird Johnson. That was where they had their first date, was in the Driscoll Hotel. So I kind of half expected to see him, frankly. But we're in this kind of a mezzanine area, and I'm smelling cigar smoke. And I'm thinking, there is no way this hotel's going to let somebody smoke in here, let alone smoke a cigar. And so that was my clue to turn on my radar. And there's Colonel Driscoll walking across the mezzanine. And it was like he was just checking out what was going on in his hotel. Well, more interesting than that is we went into this one ballroom, and there are 8 huge gold leaf mirrors. Have you been in that ballroom, Michael?
I've not. I've been in the hotel a bunch, but not in the ballroom.
Yeah. So next time you're there, go check out the ballroom with the mirrors in it. And on the mirrors, on the top of all the mirrors, they all match, is a cameo carved into the wood. And so I asked the little bellman, I said, do we know who that is? And he said, well, we think that these mirrors came from Emperor Maximilian's palace in Mexico City. I said, great. Who's the woman on the top? And he said, we think it's his wife, Carlotta. And I'm hearing in my head, that's not Carlotta, that's Lucinda. I'm thinking, who's Lucinda? So I asked, and I heard she was his mistress. I go, okay, great. So I asked my little bellman, I said, have you ever heard of a Lucinda, his mistress? And he said, no. I mean, he was like maybe 20. So I thought, well, okay. So he's talking, giving me all these details. I just called both women's spirits in, and they showed up in their ball gowns, Michael, and they showed up with their jewels on and their big hoop skirts and silk and taffeta, and just gorgeous. And I said, whose cameo is that? And Lucinda said, it's me. And they were laughing. They were having a big time. I said, okay, fine. So we finished the tour. I saw some other spirits in there, like maids and people like that. Leave the hotel, stop by a Trader Joe's to run in and get some nuts or something. And this woman in the parking lot came up to me, and she said, isn't it a beautiful day? And I said, yes, it is. I'm visiting from Birmingham, Alabama. And she said, well, I'm on the historic committee. Welcome to our town. I said, well, thank you. I just had lunch at the Driscoll, and it's lovely. She goes, oh, well, that place is haunted. And I said, yeah, I know, I'm a psychic, and I saw a bunch of stuff. And she stopped in her tracks, and she said, well, I want to know about it. And I said, all right. So I told her a little bit, and she said, there's a book on the history of the Driscoll Hotel that just went to press. I'm an editor and a publisher. Would you consider writing the afterword for this book? I need it in the next couple of days, but would you consider doing that? And I said, sure. So we part now. Okay. So it gets better. So I'm thinking, okay, all these serendipity things happening. Not really, but they were amazing. So I fly home the next day. I get my talk that morning. I fly home the next day. I'm writing the afterword on my laptop on the plane on the way home. And just for kicks, I did an internet search on Emperor Maximilian, Carlotta, Lucinda. There are all these historic references, primarily in history books, like in college level history books, that talk about Lucinda, his mistress. And so I put that footnote in the afterword of the book. The book was published a few months later, and my afterword's in there. So that all happened within 48 hours.
That is just
Wild.
wild.
So next time you're at the Driscoll, go check out the room with the mirrors.
I'm doing it. I'll look for that. Okay. You talked early on about how there are no limits in life, or we knew it as kids. If there are no limits in life, maybe there are really no limits, because we're all doing a lot of adulting. We'll call it thinking from the neck up, or unlove, or we can't help thinking, but there's something called awareness, consciousness, love, the interconnectedness of all. Call it anything you want. timelessness. What else? Limitlessness. And then there's this. What's the difference between these two flows? Is it a giant piano key, higher vibration and more density? How do you describe this versus this? Judging, fear, worry, stress?
Yeah, I think that I don't think I know that all of the spirit world is around us all the time. It's just a matter of tuning into it. I teach that our heads are like big satellite dishes and they receive and transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. And so, in order to think about somebody, to connect with somebody, I have to just think of them. And that tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency. And it opens up something similar to a two-way radio communication. And all you have to do is say something either in your head or aloud, can be a statement, can be a question, and they're going to answer you. And it's going to come in a nanosecond, as fast as you can snap your fingers or before. And that's going to be them answering you. Most of us that haven't been trained in this, and again, I've been doing this for 30 years. So most of us will say, oh, that's just my imagination. That's not really real. I'm just making that up. So we discount the information we get from spirit. But spirit's always guiding us in everything that we do all day long. We just aren't aware of it.
Do you think you could refer to athletes, artists, musicians, and how they're quietly or obviously attuned to the flow of life,
Oh
spirit,
yeah.
push? But can you give us some examples and how that maybe we're not, maybe we're great on the soccer field, the pitch, but we don't apply it to all compartments of our life. We just think that we're great on the soccer field, but we're not allowing for simplicity on every other front of our life. Can you talk to us about that? How it's complexity versus simplicity, complexity, simplicity.
Sure. Well, every author, every composer, every artist, every whatever, we all are channeling. We're all getting guidance all day long. We may not recognize it's from spirit, including our own spirit, because it's all the same thing. We're all a fractal of the divine. And so when somebody, to your point, is really good on the soccer field, but not, let's say is in high school and is flunking geometry. So what's going on there? Well, their vibrational level is raised because it's something that they're interested in. It's fun, it's exciting. And geometry is a slog. And they're thinking, oh, please just spare me. I just want to get through this class. So back to when things feel good, they're in a high vibration, that person. When they feel badly, they're in a lower vibration. Anything that feels bad is always based in fear, 100% of the time. Anger, jealousy, boredom, actual fear, grief. It's always based in fear. And the key is to be able to discern between what's a real fear and what's fake fear. Because 99.9999% of our thoughts that feel badly are always based in an irrational fear. Feels like it's going to hurt us, but it won't. And we use our imaginations to envision things we don't want, and then we suffer over them unnecessarily. It's like, if you're going to make up something good that you're going to enjoy. Why do you want to make up something you're going to suffer over? Because most of it doesn't happen anyways. It's all like, what if? What if? What if? Well, if that happens, then that'll happen. Then, and you're in this black hole of making all this stuff up. So, yeah,
That brings
it's
us
being able
right
to
into,
discern.
yeah, that brings us right into manifesting, which everybody wants certain stuff to happen in their life, or at least they think they do. Can you take us through just some of the basics about bringing in, dreaming big and bringing it in?
Well, I think where we get stuck is when we envision something happening in a certain way and we put ourselves in a box. So we all have had life experiences where there was something that we wanted and we ended up getting it, whether that was a new house or a new love or a grade on a test or whatever. Perhaps our route wasn't the way we had envisioned it. And it's been my experience, not only for myself, but with tens of thousands of clients over the years, is when we put an idea out there, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to dot, 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 fill in the blank. And then we let it unfold. when we try and control something, we're doing it out of fear, right? If we let it unfold and let the universe, our angels, our deceased loved ones, God, not necessarily in that order, help it unfold for us, then it's always better than what we can imagine. Always. Because when we're imagining things, we only have our own frame of reference. I have a story I can share about that that's recent. I have a client who works for a big network and he wanted to be promoted. Well, his company wasn't adding extra executive positions. And he wanted to go, his next jump would have been to an executive position. And this went on for years. And he was really getting distraught, although he enjoyed his job. He traveled a lot. He didn't want to have to travel as much. And there were other things that he wanted to do, but it just wasn't happening, although he wanted to stay with that company. So we talked about it over the years, and I kept saying, it's happening. It's coming together for you. You have to be patient. You have to keep your hope. You have to know that it's coming. You don't have to do anything. Just enjoy your days. Do your job. I mean, enjoy your life. Do a good job at work, but let it unfold. Well, about 3 weeks ago, that job arrived with a different company, and it was the equivalent of him jumping multiple levels. And it involved way more things than he had envisioned. And everything he told me he wanted to do over the past several years, it has that and more, and a huge bump in his income. But the job had just been created. So I kept saying, it's coming. They're putting it together for you. But when we can go with the flow instead of fighting it the whole way, well, this isn't happening, that isn't happening, then we go to, well, I must not be doing something right, or I must not be, the person for the job, or whatever. We beat ourselves up. And then what happens? Then we're in a low vibration and things don't happen. Then we can't get guidance. So that's just a recent story that's happened.
Do you have a system of checking in? You're always like, well, once a month, the first Tuesday of every month, once a week, 2 o'clock every afternoon, I pour tea for some angels myself and ask just at least 5 life questions to get more triangulation for where I'm at in life, for business, or on a particular topic that's popped up. And you're like, how should I handle this? Or is it more instantaneous for you and your automatic cruise control kicks in? How do you, or is it both? How do you handle, Julie Ryan's unique life path?
All day, every day. If I got a question, I ask it. I don't wait for a certain date or time. I do a gratitude practice every morning and every night. I have 10 fingers. There's something that goes with each finger. I write it down in the morning and I write it down at night, and then I'll do it again when I get in bed at night. And, what am I grateful for? And I think that from a physiological standpoint helps us look for the good things in life, because there's this system in the brain called the reticular activating system that is really scientifically studied, and it's what the brain's going to filter out. So the brain's going to be looking for what it is you're looking for. We've all had the experience where we buy a new car and we didn't really notice the car before or the color. Then all of a sudden we're seeing our car all over the place. Well, that's the reticular activating system at work. So I believe it's a physiological thing and a spiritual thing. And to know that spirit's there for us and they're guiding us all day long, all you have to do is ask. And they got access to universal intelligence. So doesn't get any better than that.
Love it. Past lives, are they concurrent, all happening at the same time? The more you do love in this current life, it bleeds into others. How do you describe the whole past life thing? And have you ever had an instance where someone's been in Mexico in the 1860s, but Native American in the 1880s, and also in Europe in 1890, and you did the math, they all had to be overlapping somehow? How do you describe this whole past life thing?
Yes, to all of the above. I think we have multiple lifetimes happening concurrently. And I had a past life regression hypnotherapist on my show recently, and he hypnotized me, which I'd never been hypnotized before. And we wanted to see where my healing journey began. Was I
That
a
was the next
healer?
question, is your makeup, because you have, and I've got to interrupt on this one, and we're getting right back to what you're saying. But
Yeah.
here's a huge compliment. You have, let's just put it this way, you're not shy in any way. You're just like that, and it's done. There's no separation. A lot of us, it takes a day, a week, or whatever, a moment, a breath, 5 breaths. You're just like, whatever. It's here, it's now, hope is now, possibility is now. You're just
Yeah.
like, bam. Where did that come from is the follow-up question to the story you're telling us about the hypnotist and the past life regression. What the
Well,
heck
I've
came
I've
up?
always been interested in healing stuff. I mean, my first job right out of school, I went to work for a hospital supply company and sold hospital supplies, not drugs, the supply side of the equation. And then started my first company at 25. And then I've had 9 companies in 5 industries in the past 30 years, not all medical related, but always had my fingers in medical, always most interested in medical, health, healing, that kind of thing. Not as a practitioner, but on the periphery. So I thought it would be fun to be hypnotized because I never had that happen before. And I thought it would be fun to see if I have any past lives as a healer. And we asked, where did it originate? That was wild, Michael, because it took me, I watched myself go to a star on in a galaxy 500 billion light years away. And I saw what happened with the healing energy that was put into me by spirit. I mean, 500 billion light years away, I can't even fathom that.
Did you get a
But
name for it? Andromeda, Orion, Sirius, Pleiades, some
one we hadn't heard of
one you
because
hadn't
it's
heard
500 billion light years away.
of?
Yeah. So, and then I go through in the episode, which was, I think it's me and my buddy Simon Bound. So I don't remember what the number is. It's like 512 or something. It was just a couple weeks ago. But so if you want to listen to it, just go to Ask Julie Ryan on any podcast network on YouTube, and you can see us talking about it. But it was wild. And then we also got that I was a cardiac surgeon in Massachusetts and worked at Mass General, and I could see my name on the lab coat, the doctor's lab coat, and we saw how I died. And yeah, but there's always been a healing part of the equation, and all the woo-woo stuff that I get to do is so much fun. And probably the most fascinating to me is the medical, because I see new healings happen all the time utilizing devices and methodologies that I saw used in the actual operating room for all those decades when I was in that industry. And then I see new methodologies and devices being used all the time. I see new organs being fabricated with stem cell energy that show up on subsequent scans at the doctor's office or the hospital. And over the years, I've had doctors call me and say, "What the heck are you doing? And how does this stuff work?" And so that's always fun. So it's people people schedule with me or call into my show from all over the world, and they've been to a bunch of doctors and they can't figure out what's going on. And I'm like a human MRI. I can see inside their body, certainly with their permission. I don't ever scan anybody without their permission. And somebody that's got this plethora of symptoms, I'll say, okay, you got mold exposure. Your body's full of black mold. Where's the black mold? And they'll say, "Oh my gosh, we have a problem in our home." I'll say, "Yeah, I know. I can see it." And so we clear that out, and then I give them the physical stuff to do to help their bodies heal. But it's the missing link a lot of the time
Mm.
with that. So that's how the past life came into play. Was I think I've been doing it for a really long time.
And so people are carrying around, there's been a death in the family, or it was the car accident from literally 1988, and
Yeah.
they've never dealt with it. It's in their energy field. You just come in and you kind of clean house, basically. You help them feel empowered to clean house. Yes?
Yes, two interesting points there. Nobody heals anybody else. No doctor, no healer, no medical provider of any sort ever heals anybody else. We all heal ourselves. Think about if you went to the emergency room and you had a big old cut in your leg. Well, the doctor's going to stitch you up, but the doctor doesn't make your skin grow back. You make your own skin grow back. And that's how all of this works. So you bring up a really good point because there's always a breach in the energy filled membrane that I'll explain in a moment before any kind of medical condition arises, 100% of the time. And so my feeling is if you're leaking power, what's the point? We can fix body parts all day long, but if you're leaking power, why do we want to bother? And so how we fix that, and let me back up a little bit. As I perceive it, Michael, we have the energy that's our spirit. We have the energy that's our body. The body's inside the spirit. Spirit's the power source for the body. And it's all enclosed in what I call the energy field membrane. So here's an analogy for you so you can picture it. Imagine going to the pet store and buying a goldfish. They're going to put it in a plastic bag of water in order for you to get it home. If you have a picture of that in your mind's eye, the fish represents our body, the water represents our spirit, because again, the body's inside the spirit, and the plastic bag represents the energy filled membrane. If there's a pinhole in that plastic bag and water is draining out a drop at a time for a long time, that fish will be fine. However, when enough water drains out, that fish is going to be in trouble. And that's what happens to the human body. So I'll envision myself and my graduates in my class, same thing. They learn how to do all this. We'll go into that tear or hole and we'll be shown a scene. And I'll be given what the year is, a little bit about what happened. If it's past life, same thing, where it was, when it was, what happened, and we'll correlate it with what's going on in their current life. It's been my experience doing this tens of thousands of times, literally, that as soon as we illuminate where that energy block, that's what I call it, began, it eradicates it. The energy filled membrane instantly heals. Body's working on full power, helps the body heal, helps the body regain and maintain health. Now, what could that be? That it's always an emotional event. It may be somebody called you a bad name when you were little and it hurt your feelings. Somebody called you a poopy head when you were 3. And we look at that now, we think, well, that was not a big deal. Well, yes, it was to your 3-year-old little self at the time. And it may be something dramatic. I mean, it's run the gamut of all kinds of things. My favorite dramatic story is I was working with a woman who lives in Guernsey, which is one of the northern British Isles. And I saw this scene of her as a preteen, and there was an explosion behind her. And I said, "Does that mean anything to you?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, I was a victim of an IRA bombing when I was 12." She said, "I spent 3 months in the hospital." I didn't know that. I'd never talked to this woman before. That was a big old emotional event. As soon as we illuminated it, eradicated it, to your point a minute ago. And not only was it gone, but that energy field membrane healed. And there's always room for psychotherapy, but unlike psychotherapy, that'll tell a client, now, Michael, we're going to talk about your life. And it'll be as if we're peeling an onion a layer at a time. Great. Always room for psychotherapy. In my method, I want to get that onion out by the root, because it's been my experience that all the pent up energy from all the emotional events that has piled on top of that energy block, which looks like a little kernel of unpopped popcorn to me, it removes it in one fell swoop. I don't think we need to, get re-traumatized of revisiting all this stuff. It just gets rid of it. It's fabulous.
Can you share a couple of examples where you've done the work, but you've been able to stay in touch with or witness the person 6 months later, years later, and talk about the turnaround, the cascade effect? Because it could be everything. It could be the look of the eyes, they're connected fully above, they're sparkly, they're flowing energetically, but maybe their body's changed, their look has changed. Have you noticed that from time to time when you do get to stay in touch? I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in and they're out, but it could be like the husband, the son, the somebody, your guinea pigs in the family, extended cousin. Give us a couple of those so you can talk about how important this is for, we'll call it realigning with love.
And a woman named Louise, who called into my show probably 3 weeks ago, and she called in for her husband, David, and he was having prostate issues. And so she had his permission. I'm always going to ask the person telepathically whether I have permission to scan them or not, because their spirit can talk to me and that's fine, but I'm not looking inside their body without their permission. It's like looking at a chest x-ray without somebody's permission. So I was laughing. I said, is he going to be okay if we talk about his nether regions on the air? And he said, yeah. So I watched an energetic healing happen. It involved surgery. It involved reducing the size of the prostate. Well, she called in 2 weeks later and she said, oh my goodness, within no time flat, he's not up in the middle of the night. He has no discomfort. I mean, it's like, it's just done. That's an example. I have met, thousands of them. I love it when organs show up after stem cell healings. I have a client whose spleen was removed when she was a teenager. She was in a car accident and she had kidney stones, and she went in for a scan and they did a CT scan on her, and they said, they were showing them to her and they said, look, there's your spleen. She goes, no, no, my spleen was removed when I was a teenager. And they go, well, it's right there. So kidneys, livers, stuff like that. It's just all across the board. But it's a really important point to always remember: nobody heals anybody else. The healing happens on the energetic level. The person's going to integrate into their body. That can happen instantly. It can take days, weeks, months. May need some kind of complementary care like change in diet, physical therapy, surgery, whatever. But it's always that person's prerogative to utilize the healing in a way that's going to best facilitate whatever it is their spirit's exploring in this lifetime. Nobody heals anybody else. We help the person. We facilitate and help the person heal themselves.
Is it fair to say that in our reacting to childhood trauma, teenage trauma, trauma, drama, you name it, oftentimes we're fighting to stay out of the body? And can you describe that? You're helping people reintegrate in and breathe and walk a smoother path energetically. Can you talk to us about all that a different way? Are you helping people own what they've got more fully, or reconnecting? Is the question making sense?
I don't do that from a cognitive standpoint unless the person's spirit's out of their body. And then my grandson, by marriage, he's now almost 18. When he was 2, he choked on a chicken nugget. And his name is Max, and his middle name's Ryan, after the wicked step grandmother, me, which I thought was a score. I thought that was pretty good. So I get a call. Max, the EMS guys are working on him. He's not just blue, he's purple. He's not breathing. They got him out on the front lawn. And I, of course, tuned into him and scanned him. And I said, Max Ryan, you get back in your body right now. And he did, Michael. And then I happened to be downtown, and they brought his mom and him down to Children's Hospital. Well, I walked in the place like I owned it. I mean, because I've been in hospitals for 30 years. I know the drill. I was waiting on the loading dock when that ambulance backed up into the emergency room, and he was fine. So that's an example. I have another friend who had surgery, and when she was in the recovery room, her spirit was flitting around the room, looked like Casper the Friendly Ghost. And I said, Angela, you got to get back in your body. And she was just flitting around. And then, so what I did was I called her mom's spirit in, and her mom was deceased, and I grew up with her. So I knew her my whole life. And she said, Angela, get in your body now. And she did instantly. So stuff like that. There have been times where I want to scan somebody and their spirit's kind of in and out of their body. And so, did you see Peter Pan?
I mean, I've seen different Peter Pans, sure.
Like a million years ago, Peter Pan at the beginning of the play or the movie, he's lost his shadow.
Oh, yeah.
And Wendy sews his shadow to his toes, like to the tip of his toes. I've watched that happen to get somebody's spirit anchored into their body. And it just reminds me of Peter Pan. I see all these wild visuals. So I don't have that much of an occasion where if somebody's spirit's out of their body, Michael, they're in one of the phases of transition in most instances. And I'm unable to scan them from a visual standpoint, which is interesting because back to the spirit's the power source for the body. I can't scan somebody and get a visual. I can get information other ways by talking to that person's spirit, but it would be the equivalent of looking at an x-ray in a pitch black room without any electricity. I'm not able to see it because the spirit, again, is the power source for the body. Does that answer your question?
It sure does. And I have a picture of Tinkerbell.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
And there's a fairy around here somewhere. I'll show Ginger just one quick photo. Oh, here we go. Okay, here's a fairy named Ginger.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to Ireland in a couple of weeks.
Ooh, tell us
Yeah.
about that. Is it for work? Is it psychic stuff or just pure fun?
Fun. I've been invited to a party in a castle for the weekend.
First of all, this is immediately like the Driscoll Hotel all over again. You know it. I know it. You're going to have some stories. We're going to have you back on, but it won't be appearing until June of 2025. We're booked that far out. Hey, I've got to ask you one developmental thing. I mean, look, life is not always, but I think it is a totally smooth path if you want it to be. I mean, all moments can be the same, easy, fun, loving, but good luck with that. Can you get out of here? There's some ebb and flow, and there's got to be some contrast. Love is what makes it all fantastic in some way. Talk to us at the very beginning of you having to accept the skills. Did you run for the hills for at least 2 days first? You're like, oh, I'm going to a daytime movie. This isn't happening. Did you put up a fight at all? Were you always like, yes, what's next? Give us one example where the human side was like, hey, wait, whoa, what? I'm sticking with my businesses. I got a 10th business I want to start. And I was thinking about this trip to Asia. Like, where was the rub?
Well, I remember I learned how to do this stuff. So it didn't just show up. So it showed up over time. And my favorite story about that is I was with my mentor and she was doing a healing on me. So whenever a healing is done on me, my deceased loved ones line the sides of, I'm on a massage table face up with a blankie on and a pillow and I'm all cozy. Well, one day I was with her and this spirit of a dead Pope showed up with his Pope hat on and the whole 9 yards. And I said, well, who are you? He had a shepherd's rod, everything. I said, well, who are you? And in a nice way. And he said, I'm Clement. And I said, I never heard of a Pope Clement. He laughed and he said, well, I was number 6. And I said, okay, how may I help you? Kind of like, why are you here? And he said, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies because it's been so bastardized and people are so afraid and it's ridiculous. So you know what happens. By that point, my mother had died. Her spirit was in the room. And I had developed the 12 phases of transition in my mind and all of that. Worked with a couple of other people who'd passed by that point. And so he said, so you're supposed to teach the world what happens. I said to him, I'm not doing that. I'm a businesswoman. People will think I'm nuts. And he laughed and he said, yeah. Everything you've done has prepared you for this. So just get on with it. I said, yeah, sorry, you're going to have to find somebody else. So, Michael, I leave my mentor's office. I get in the car and just for kicks on my phone, I did an internet search on Pope Clement VI. Come to find out, this guy was in office during the Black Plague when 2/3 of Europe died, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. So, okay, yeah, whatever. Fast forward a couple of years. I'm still not doing this because I'm thinking this is going to be just disastrous. Somebody's going to see my AskJulieRyan.com website and they're going to be doing business with me and going, this woman's a Looney Tune. So I'm at church one Sunday. I'm sitting between my husband and my son, and the priest from the pulpit in his sermon says, Wouldn't it be nice if somebody could tell us if angels and our loved ones really greet us and lead us into paradise, like the in paradisum prayer? And I'm getting elbowed on either side from my son and my husband. And I thought, God, really? You're giving me grief about this in church from the pulpit? Seriously? So at that point, then I polished my golden ovaries because, guys have brass balls and girls have golden ovaries. Polished my golden ovaries and I wrote my book, Angelic Attendants, and that launched everything.
And last question before we'll let you as a show host wrap up the show for some final reminders for folks. But talk about your family members. They sound super supportive for you. How have you witnessed their expansion, their growth, their patience, their humor over all this as the years went by?
Oh, they all thought I was nuts. They were like,
But not anymore.
why are you doing this? Yeah. It started to change certainly when my mother was dying and she knew I could see. I was the only one with her when she died. Everybody else arrived about 10 minutes later. She was in a hospice facility board, like inpatient hospice. And then my father was having some surgery. I pinpointed exactly what was going on, what they would find when they got in there. And when I nail stuff, they have to stop and think and go, okay, how does she know that? And the best though, Michael, is my older brother, Jay, just didn't believe any of it for years and years and years and years. I mean, years. And one night he called me and his best friend had had a stroke. And he said, Tim's had a stroke. He's in the operating room. They're removing part of his skull because his brain's swelling. Do your thing. So he said, do your thing. And I said, all right. So I didn't think Tim would get out of the operating room. He was in phase 11 of 12. I thought, oh, yeah. I mean, all the angels were there, all the deceased loved ones' spirits. He was in a position for takeoff here momentarily. But he said to me, Tim, who I knew because we all went to high school together, he was a lawyer. He still is. He's living now 15, 20 years later. He was a lawyer developer with his father, and they were getting ready to close some big, huge real estate deal that the two of them only knew the nuances of the deal. And Tim, unconscious, under anesthesia in the operating room, getting part of his skull removed, said, you got to get Jay to give my dad this message because otherwise the deal's going to go south. So I don't remember what it was, but it was something specific. So I called Jay back. I told him he's in the waiting room with the family. He went up to Tim's dad and he said, Tim talked to my sister, just run with me on this. And he wants you to know XYZ. He said, I thought his dad was going to faint. He said his dad had to sit down. And he said, there's no way you could know that because nobody knows that information except for Tim and I. And so my brother thought, okay, there's something to this. So that's the thing is when I nail something that there's no way I could know. That's when they start to take notice. And I feel like they all look like Scooby-Doo going, her, tilting their head going, what? Kind of a thing. So it's really fun when that happens. But at this point, frankly, I don't really care if somebody believes it or not. I don't care. What do you want to talk about? Football, the weather? Whatever. If you want to know more about this, great. If you don't, that's fine too. I'm just game to, I'm delighted to be with you and to be having a conversation with you. So I don't have the need to convince anybody.
Oh, yeah. You know your own worth or spot X like here. So I don't think anyone's going to budge you. And yeah, you don't have to pay attention to anybody saying anything that's not positive. Before we end up or close up here or wrap up, can I put up a photo of my mom and dad in their 20s? My dad passed when I was 2 in 1970. It was his time to go off the coast of Italy, Naples at nighttime. They're in an F-4 Phantom fighter off the carrier Roosevelt. Hundreds of people have seen them, like not today, but like, recently. And my mom passed when I was turning 23. They're reconciled. They're positive. They've paid the bills. And I think it's just like yesterday from their perspective. So they give great advice at, treetop level or bush level. Can I put their photo up? I don't want to interfere or do anything that you wouldn't do on another show. Is that okay?
Well, yeah, I don't need a photo. Your dad's on your
Oh,
right and your mom's on your left.
and here they are for the
Yeah.
audience then. And
Yeah.
that's Barb and Michael Sr. or Mike Sr.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same name.
They're both there. Yeah.
Oh, this
They
is
look
wow.
older than they do in that photograph. But yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay, take over the show.
Your
Conclude.
dad, your
Oh,
dad's saying he likes the haircut. He likes your haircut. I like the haircut, is what he said.
cool. Cool.
So yeah, maybe a little bit longer than what he would have worn at that stage of the game, but he wants you to know that he likes your haircut.
I'm due
They
for a haircut soon. We'll see.
they they come in with this random stuff that normally doesn't make any sense to us, the person that receives the information. I had somebody call into my show last week and wanted to know if her twin in heaven, she had an actual twin who died, had a message for her. What was a symbol that she would know he's around? And he showed me a grape popsicle. And I said, he's showing me a grape popsicle. Does that mean anything to you? She said, yeah, it was our favorite treat when we were little. They just come in. We expect them to have some big life altering, esoteric, here, this is going to change the world kind of a statement. And they're saying, look for the grape popsicle or whatever. So it's really fun to see what they come in with.
Okay, you're wrapping us up here, but can you talk about how we can all walk a smoother path? And then you got to finish off that sentence.
Pay attention to how things feel, because we are all born with an internal GPS system. It's called emotion. When we have a feeling that feels bad, you need to be able to discern. You don't need to do anything. I recommend you give it some thought as to, is this a rational fear? Is this an irrational fear? And an easy way to do that is just to ask yourself, if you're feeling badly about something like a job, or somebody doesn't like me, or your heart's breaking because you've just broken up with your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whomever, just ask yourself, is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? I call it the 2-minute rule. The answer is yes. Change the conditions, get out of the road before the bus runs you over. That's a rational fear. If the answer is no in this game, it's only yes or no, then it's an irrational fear. And when we can do that, it takes a nanosecond. But what it does, Michael, is it keeps us out of fight or flight. Because when we're in fight or flight, we don't think clearly. The blood drains from our brain, goes into our extremities, and it's going to our heart and our legs and arms, so we can run away faster. But we're not thinking clearly. So if you can stay out of fight or flight, not only is it going to help you live a more joyful life, but it's going to be better for you from a medical standpoint and a health standpoint. Because when we're in fight or flight, what happens? Cortisol gets released, our blood pressure goes up. We've got all this inflammation happening, and that's the cause of most illnesses, is inflammation. So just remember real easily, is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? And you're going to laugh a lot of the time. You're going to think, no, if I flunk this test, it's not going to kill me in the next 2 minutes, and you'll laugh. And it just keeps you out of fight or flight. So that's a real good way to do it. Pay attention to how things feel, because it's the only part of us that's really in the moment, is our bodies. Our brains are thinking, oh, how am I going to handle this? What am I going to say next? What if? But our body's going, this feels bad. This feels good. Pay attention to how things feel.
I love it. Hey, we're going to blow sage. I would have forgotten, and I've only done that a couple times because I'm thoroughly enjoying the guest. But I'm going to blow sage. I'll light it in Texas. You'll catch it in Alabama. We did this before the show, but we'll start afresh. Hopefully you'll get it again. Folks at home, just set your intent. It's a staple of the show. I got to light some sage.
I got to light some sage.
Yeah. So your heart already knows what to do. You're smelling without smelling, the Zen thing. You're connecting to the energy of it all. It doesn't matter if you're watching this in 2028 from New Zealand. No time and space quite the way we know. Sage, red-tailed hawk feather. Julia, are you already getting it before I can do any pushing of it?
Yep, I'm good.
And ask for flowers as well if you're at home. Julie, are you getting any flowers as I now start to stub this out?
Yeah, peach roses.
I didn't do it. We're going to blame angels or blame Canada. It's up to folks to choose what they want to blame, but or give gratitude. Thanks. Julie Ryan, you've been absolutely fantabulous on angels, positivity, and love. I'd love to have you back on next year. Talk to you after the show about that. Thank you for being a guest on this program.
Oh, my honor. May I tell everybody about the gift I want to send to them?
Please, absolutely. Any which way.
Okay. Angelic attendance, what really happens as we transition from this life into the next. If you want a free copy of this, just go to askjulieryan.com or go to julieryangift.com and we'll send you a free digital and audiobook version. So share it with those you love. Everybody's going to die. Everybody's going to lose a loved one. Let's get this information out there so that you know what to expect. And it's really going to help relieve the fear. It's going to add a glorious component to a heart-wrenching situation. So julieryangift.com or on my homepage, askjulieryan.com. I'm on all the socials at Ask Julie Ryan. I'm on YouTube. I'm on all the podcast channels. We do a live show every Thursday night at 8 Eastern. So call in with your question and ask Julie Ryan. It's a blast.
Wonderful, Julie. Thank you again for being a guest on the show.
My honor. Thanks for having me.